Hello. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Hello, Carmen. How are you? Howdy, partners. About to lasso in some viewers. Well, thank you. Love to see a lasso in some viewers. That would be great. We probably got some pretty good competition today, but that's all right. Things will work out. Oh, I forgot to show my face. There we go. How you doing? Okay, so there was some big news about the ACA today. I'm not sure whether it was good news. It's good news to some people, and not so good news for other people. Okay, says no notice again tonight. Shake my head. Nah, Facebook is probably suppressing us. They seem to be suppressing everybody else, so they're probably suppressing us too, right? Anyway, I hardly think they'd go to the trouble of suppressing us, but maybe it's no trouble. So maybe that's why they're doing it. So there was news today, Supreme Court news. Appeared in Common Dreams. No premiums, no deductibles, no surprise bills. People calling for Medicare for all. Demonstrating outside of the Charleston Gaillard Center in South Carolina, ahead of the Democratic presidential debate on February 25th, 2020. Headline: After SCOTUS upholds the Affordable Care Act, progressives set sights on Medicare for all. It was written by Jessica Corbett today. She's the staff writer for Common Dreams, one of the staff writers. As Americans who have accessed health insurance because of the Affordable Care Act breathed a sigh of relief on Thursday, after a 7-2 Supreme Court ruling upheld the law for a third time, progressive politicians and campaigners set their sights on a more ambitious goal, Medicare for all. The court's decision to not overturn the ACA and throw 31 million Americans off their health care is welcome, but it's not enough, tweeted Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, a lead congressional advocate of implementing a single-payer system in the United States. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services earlier this month revealed that a record 31 million people have health coverage through the ACA, which health justice advocates have long criticized as inadequate. Republican political leaders have repeatedly attacked it with lawsuits, including Supreme Court challenges in 2012 and 2015. Now, right at this point, I have to stop. And I have to express my puzzlement at why even alternative media sources like Common Dreams do not point out how many people remain uncovered by the ACA. When we started with the ACA, started to pass a health insurance reform bill in 2009, the estimates were that there were 45 million people uncovered at that particular time. Now, that was based on data that was current in 2005. By 2009, a lot of people had lost their jobs. It's really debatable as to whether there were still only 45 million people uncovered in 2009. There may have been more in 2009. But in any case, since 2009, roughly 20 million people have been added to the population of the United States. And more, since the 45 million was estimated in 2005. So the question is, how many millions are uncovered now? Have we made any progress in reducing the number of uncovered people since 2009? I don't think that 45 million people was right in 2009. I think it was more like 50 million people. Okay, but even then, have we actually reduced the 50 million people? So, if they covered 31 million people, but 20 million people were added to the population since 2009, and there were 50 million uncovered in 2009, that is then 50 and 20. That's a total of 70 million uncovered people. The ACA covered 31 million of them. So that leaves 49 million people uncovered. Still, no progress. No progress. Furthermore, how many people lost their health care coverage where they lost their jobs during the pandemic? How many? Unemployment rates were going up during the pandemic to 25 and 30 million people, 33 million people at one point, okay, if I recall correctly. All kinds of people on unemployment insurance been severed from their jobs and the health care they were getting through their jobs. So granted, there were 31 million people this past month covered through the ACA. But how many people was the ACA failing to pick up? Even if you assume that no coverage was lost through the time of the pandemic, as I just calculated for you, there was still 49 million uncovered people. Even if we figure that many people got jobs back again as a result of the partial recovery we've seen and are now covered once again by private insurance, if there were 15 million people still uncovered as a result of the pandemic, if you add them to the 49 million people, we're looking at 62 million uncovered people. Now, some previous research that I did indicated that one out of every 781 people who are not covered by insurance die. Okay, so what did I say? 49 plus 15? That's 64 million people uncovered. Divided by 781. What do we have here? 81,946 fatalities. In 2000, in the last 12 months, now there's probably some overlap here with COVID fatalities also, so you can't attribute it all. But the fatalities just due to lack of insurance were close to 82,000 people. We know COVID was responsible for 1 million. There's some overlap of those two sets, but we don't know how much the overlap is, which would then be subtracted from the total. We do know that the Institute for Health Metrics Evaluation at the University of Washington thinks that we've reached roughly 1 million deaths due to COVID now. That's really a scandal. Things would have been different had the ACA not been passed in 2009, had HR 676 been passed in 2009. Then, in 2020 to 21, during the last 12 months, we would have had no deaths due to lack of insurance. We probably still would have had close to as many die from COVID, because that was a different matter. But at least we wouldn't have had however many extra people die due to lack of insurance. So, from my point of view, the ACA is, and always has been, a gross failure. It did not begin to reduce the scale of the problem. It did not even succeed sufficiently to accommodate the extra 20 to 25 million people added to the United States since 2009. It failed to keep up. It didn't even run fast enough to keep up. Going back to the article, the Urban Institute recently estimated that striking down the 2010 law, also known as Obamacare, would leave 21 million people uninsured. I don't know where they got that from, since if 31 million people are covered by the Affordable Care Act, if that was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, then why wouldn't all 31 million people have been off of health insurance immediately? I don't know, but that seems a strange estimate. I probably have to read the paper to see what they did to come up with the 21 million people figure. Anyway, quote, "Healthcare is a human right, not a privilege," Sanders declared Thursday. "We must join other major countries in guaranteeing healthcare for all and pass Medicare for all." That message was echoed by the groups Healthcare Now and Social Security Works, as well as Michael Alighty, who is currently head of the state single-payer coalition Healthy California Now, and has spent the past 3 decades fighting for Medicare for all. Social Security Works was tweeting, "This is welcome news, but now we have to go on offense." The Supreme Court rejected the lawsuits from the Republican governed states. "It is good that the question of ACA constitutionality is settled, because now, rather than defending or even taking a position on the law, progressive campaigners can move on from that and build, going forward, a better system," Lighty said to Common Dreams. More statements of that sort coming for many people. Larry Levitt tweeted, Supreme Court has dismissed the case against the Affordable Care Act. At this point, it sure seems like the Affordable Care Act isn't going away for the foreseeable future. We need to make it go away by passing Medicare for all. In a majority opinion written by Justice Stephen Breyer, the High Court concluded the Republican plaintiffs did not have the standing to challenge the ACA's minimum coverage requirement, quote, because they have not shown a past, a future injury fairly traceable to defendants' conduct enforcing the specific statutory provision they attack as unconstitutional. In other words, they had to show damages. They did not do that. And so they had no standing. There was two justices who dissented, Samuel Alito, who was a Bush appointee, and Neil Gorsuch, the first of the Trump appointees. The court declined to address the broader question of whether the ACA is legal without a provision killed by the GOP-controlled Congress in 2017 that imposed a tax penalty on those who did not meet the coverage mandate. President Joe Biden celebrated Thursday's ruling in a tweet that referenced what he said when former President Obama signed the ACA into law over a decade ago. Biden, then vice president, was caught on a hot mic telling him this is a big fucking deal. Shit. And today he said it's a big win for the American people. There's no better day than today to sign up for quality, affordable health care at healthcare.gov. With millions of people relying on the Affordable Care Act for coverage, it remains as ever a BFD. And it's here to stay. Lee Saunders, president of the labor union, AFSC, CME, AFSCME, which is a union, of government workers, the American Federation, I'm sure it's government workers union, concurred, calling the court's decision a huge victory for basic fairness, for the rule of law, and especially for those who would have been cruelly stripped of their health care during a once-in-a-century global pandemic. So there were lots of celebratory comments of that sort. Public Citizen said this is a huge relief, but make no mistake, they're going to keep trying to rip away your health care piece by piece. This is why we need to make health care a human right for all. And there's more of this in the article. So Michael Leidy said, the next step is Medicare expansion, lowering the eligibility age from 65, capping out-of-pocket costs, and adding dental, hearing, and vision benefits, which could all be paid for by letting the federal government negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Well, that's great. It would certainly be an improvement, but here the progressives are again. They're negotiating with themselves. In case you hadn't noticed, Jayapal introduced H.R. 1976, which is the Medicare for All bill for 2021. They introduced that not too long ago. Why are they not calling for a passage of that bill? Why is Leidy saying the next step is Medicare expansion? Sure, that would be better than what we have now. And it'd be great to have a cap of out-of-pocket costs and have dental, hearing, and vision benefits. And it would be great to negotiate with the drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Well, that is an improvement on what we have now, and it is a step on the road to Medicare for all. But it is not Medicare for all. If they didn't intend to fight for Medicare for all in this Congress, why in heaven's name did they pass it? And if they really want to lower the eligibility age from 65, why are they already talking about lowering it from 65 to 60? Even a couple of months ago, they were saying to 55 or 60. You knew even then they were going to cave at 60. But they're pre-caving. They don't even have a bill out yet that specifies lowering the age from 65 to 60. Lowering drug prices. They should have done that long ago. That was a compromised position in 2009 and 2010. Anyway, there's a lot of negotiating with ourselves going on here. There's a lot of pre-negotiating before people are being forced to take a floor vote on what you really want, which is Medicare for all. So Leidy, who's the former president of PNHP, the Physicians for a National Health Care Program, or healthcare plan. I forget what the second P stands for. The leading organization in advocacy for Medicare for all is not today, or their past president is not today calling for the passage of Medicare for all now, within the next 2 months. Why the hell not? Why the hell not? Is there anything good about the Affordable Care Act? Anything good? David Sirota and Andrew Perez at the Jacobin, and originally at the Daily Poster, said on June 13th, 2021, nobody should be celebrating the Affordable Care Act. In fortifying for-profit healthcare companies, sorry, I have forgotten to share that, but I will share it now. Okay, you should be seeing it about now. In fortifying the for-profit healthcare companies, the Affordable Care Act became a cautionary tale about the political supremacy of an insurance industry that many Americans hate. Might even be the case that a majority of us hate the healthcare industry. There should be a poll that says, how many of you hate the healthcare industry? I should say, sorry, didn't mean the healthcare industry. I meant the insurance industry. The issue is, how many people hate the insurance industry, the private insurance industry? But it's now become something even more profound. The ACA's modest popularity, forged in desperation, proves that an initiative can now be considered a political win, quote unquote, even if it preserves a problem, steamrolls alternatives, and makes a crisis more difficult to fix. Yeah, that's what the ACA did. We are more than 10 years removed from the passage of the ACA. In fact, we are 11 years removed from the passage of the ACA, which was in March if I recall, March 23rd of 2010. It is now June 17th, 2021. That is 11 full years. And the Affordable Care Act, which was touted as a step towards Medicare for all, has now been successful in delaying the passage of Medicare for all for 11 years. Do you know how many people died because of that particular delay due to lack of insurance? I have a pretty good idea. I think it's 500,000 people. And that doesn't count those who died from COVID. So arguably, the passage of the Affordable Care Act was itself a crime. The decision to take something other than Medicare for all. Oh, you may say they had to pass something in 2010 and in 2009. Well, apart from the fact that the truth is they didn't want to pass Medicare for all, the other fact is that even if you suggest they couldn't pass it, it would have been better from the standpoint of human suffering of Americans if they had tried full bore for it, had the Republicans and conservative Dems be successful in beating it, and then ran in 2010 on the opposition of the Republicans and the conservative Dems to Medicare for all. If they had run on Medicare for all for 2010, maybe they wouldn't have gotten beaten so darn badly in the election of 2010. When they passed the Affordable Care Act, all they had to run on in 2010 was the anemic recovery, the slowest recovery in history, due to the inadequate ARRA stimulus bill, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, Obama's big stimulus bill. That was not big enough to avoid the slowest recovery in our history since the Second World War. Another failure, of Obama. In short, they had nothing to run on in 2010. That's why the Republicans slaughtered them in the race for the House. And won a few Senate seats too. It was a devastating defeat for the Democrats. It was due to the fact that they did nothing and they had nothing to run on and they had no excuses. Especially not with the majorities they had then. 58 senators in the Senate. I think it was a majority of 45 to 50 in the House. And they produced nothing the American people liked. What a gross failure. Anyway, Sirota and Perez go on here, case by case, detail by detail. They say, in essence, a policy sold on the, quote, audacity of hope has helped deflate hope for anything better. And in the process, killed, as I said, had 500,000 unnecessary deaths. If you want to see the arithmetic on that, then go to my blog and look at the blog post on how many Americans have to die before national improved MFA is passed. I wrote that, as I recall, in 2017 or 2018. And It contained a calculation showing 356,000 deaths from 2010 through 2016, and estimates for the Trump administration through 2024. By 2021, there were roughly 500,000 deaths that were going to happen by then due to lack of insurance. Those deaths were attributable to the decision to pass the Affordable Care Act instead of Medicare for All. Now, you may say, and you'd be right, that if they postpone the Affordable Care Act, there would have been another, 45,000 deaths or 50,000 deaths in 2010. But remember, the Affordable Care Act didn't go into full effect until 2014. And relatively few lives were saved before then. Why did they delay it till 2014? Because they wanted to build up tax revenues to pay for part of it, because they were doing austerity baloney. So that's what was happening there. So really, because any further health insurance reform was rendered impossible by their loss, the Democrats' loss in 2010, passing that act built all those deaths into the picture. If they had waited for another year, ran on something else, and won the elections of 2010, and then passed the Medicare for All in 2011, designed to go into effect in 2012, from the standpoint of avoiding fatalities, that would have worked a hell of a lot better than what was done. The right move in 2010, and I'm not using hindsight for this. I wrote blogs in 2009 and 2010 saying, kill this bill. Kill the bill. It's a bailout for the insurance industry. I knew what would happen, and it happened in that way. Anyway, the article talks about a lot of laughing and yucking it up. Okay, in the video, has the corny vibe of a 90s buddy reunion comedy flick. That was the video with Biden and Obama celebrating a record 31 million Americans now getting their health insurance coverage, but through the Affordable Care Act. Of course, they never talk about what might have been if they'd gone the other route, because if they did, it would instantly become apparent that they really screwed up and they deserve to be beaten badly in 2010. Passing that law was not a heroic gesture. It was a crime. And it's not worth any celebrations. And I know some of you are going to come back and say, my life was saved by the Affordable Care Act. Oh, yeah? In what year? Because if it wasn't saved in 2010, if it wasn't saved in 2011, but was saved at any time later, it might have been saved a lot quicker and a lot less cost if a Medicare for All bill had been passed in 2011 and implemented at the beginning of 2012, as was perfectly possible. A section on the ACA works best for insurance companies. The uninsured rate has steadily increased over the last several years. Nearly 30 million Americans were uninsured in 2019, according to census data. but there were also census data in 2020. And then, of course, in 2020 and 21, we had all the other uncovered Americans who were let loose from their jobs and their coverage by COVID. So again, how many Americans are really uncovered? 80% of Americans told Gallup that they have not seen their health insurance premiums decline since the passage of the ACA. And 50% say they fear being medically bankrupted. 50%. Amazing. And medical claim denial rates have been skyrocketing. Insurers reject more than 1 out of every 6 health insurance claims made by patients on Affordable Care Act exchange plans. They get to deny coverage of claims in 1 out of every 6 cases. Under Medicare for All, those people just get treated. They go to a provider, they get treated, the government pays the bill. No claims have to be made by you, the person. You're just covered. You never see a balance billing. Reuters recently reported that while the uninsured rate is lower than it was 2 decades ago, the proportion of adults unable to afford doctor visits, by the way, 2 decades ago was in 2001, the proportion of adults unable to afford doctor visits climbed from 11.4% to 15.7%. You've got insurance, but you can't afford the doctor visits anyway. That problem goes away with Medicare for All. Annual family premiums for employer-sponsored health insurance rose 4%, to average $21,342 in 2020, according to data from the Kaiser Family Foundation. $21,342. Most probably to cover the average family of 4. If someone's making a minimum wage, how much do they make in a year? Is it roughly $15,000? That doesn't cover the annual family premium. So a minimum wage worker isn't even covering the premium, lacking $6,000 to cover the premium. And one of the 2 workers in such a family makes no contribution to food or rent or any other thing. If they're covered by health insurance. Of course, employers contribute to that. But that comes out of the potential wage, of workers. Anyway, among those with employer-based healthcare coverage, about 1 in 5 say someone in their household has been contacted by a collection agency in the past 12 months because of medical bills. And 9% say they have at some point declared personal bankruptcy because of medical bills. That was according to a study in 2019 by the Kaiser Family Foundation. To be sure, the simple, straightforward expansion of Medicaid was the best part of the original law. But by its own author's admission, Obamacare went out of its way to try to halt the larger push for a single-payer system because, in the words of Obama Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, they believed, quote, dismantling private health coverage for the 180 million Americans that have it, discouraging more employers from coming into the marketplace, is a bad direction to go, unquote. They didn't want single payer. If we have single payer, then employers are freed from the healthcare marketplace. The government picks up the tab. There's no discouraging more employers from coming into the marketplace. That's ridiculous. The real thrust of the Affordable Care Act has always been to find ways to pretend to address the healthcare crisis while enriching the health insurers that are fueling it. So the article goes through more and more of this. It's also an indictment of the Affordable Care Act. And then there's also a discussion of, well, good line, put it all together. This data shows the Affordable Care Act works in the same way a train robbery works. It works really well for the thieves, but not so well for the passengers. Then there's demoralization, tribalization, and healthcare surrenders. People generally understand their insurance company is out to screw them, even more than their gas station. About a third of unvaccinated Americans believe they, quote, might have to pay an out-of-pocket cost to get the COVID-19 vaccine, even though it's free, according to a recent survey data from the Kaiser Family Foundation. Yet here's the thing. Many of the passengers seem fairly content with the heist, or at a minimum, grateful that it's just a larceny and not an execution. That is well put. Gallup recently found that even as healthcare costs continue to increase, more Americans say they are now satisfied with what they're saying. And what did P.T. Barnum say? There's a sucker born every day. When it comes to the ACA in specific, Kaiser Family Foundation's most recent polling found 53% of Americans view the program favorably. 53%. Why, that's a grand vote of confidence. How many view Medicare favorably? 80%? I believe that's what it is. 80% or 82% or 83%. I'm not talking Medicare for all now. 80%, 88% of Democrats want that. I'm talking conventional Medicare that we have now with all its holes. 80% of Americans view that program favorably. The ACA is a stadium away from that in approval rating. Some of that can be attributed to the varied and nebulous understanding of what the ACA hodgepodge actually is. Some understand it primarily to be just a long overdue prohibition on denying coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. Some view it as just subsidies for slightly lower premiums. Some perceive it as the devil they know that's safer than the devil they don't. And some see it as at least modestly better than the Republican agenda of just sending people to the glue factory when they get sick. The Republican plan, as stated by Alan Grayson in 2009. The Republican plan is don't get sick, but if you do, then die quickly. That is still the Republican plan to this day, in my view. Fair or unfair, justified or unjustified, the bottom line is this. After a decade of Democratic Party propagandizing and GOP offering no alternative at all, the ACA remains somewhat popular. The support is thin. Lots of polls show Americans want to see the program improved, but there's no denying that it has support, even as it has politically fortified and abusive for-profit insurance industry. So I'm going to skip the rest of this. And mercifully, going to the very last two paragraphs. In short, we don't have to just accept that the best we can hope for is a policy that funnels more cash to private insurance companies in exchange for smaller and smaller discount coupons for more and more expensive medical care. Perceiving that downward spiral as normal and laudable is a choice by elected officials, by party power brokers, and by voters. And it is a choice we can reject. And let us do so and go forward and pass Medicare for all as soon as we can. Let us pass it as part of the upcoming infrastructure bill. And don't tell me it will never pass. I know it will probably never pass. You don't have to tell me that. Because I know the way you all feel now, it will never pass. But how are you going to feel after you go out and have a general strike demanding that it be passed? Instead of sitting at home and just taking it again and again and again, maybe we need that general strike now. Maybe we do. Next, let's move to climate politics. This is Ryan Cooper from Today. The interminable Senate about negotiations on infrastructure are grinding on. A bipartisan group of conservatives is reportedly attempting to hammer out some kind of bargain, while a growing group of progressive senators and representatives say they will not vote for anything that doesn't have adequate provisions to fight climate change. In response, John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, the second-ranking Senate Republican, has reportedly said that the focus on climate change risked his support. Like the infrastructure bill was ever going to have his support? Like anything that might be perceived as giving Joe Biden a win was going to have his support? Maybe he correctly perceived that the lousy infrastructure bill that he was going to support would be viewed as a defeat for Joe Biden and therefore would contribute to a Republican victory in 2022, because that is what this game is really about. To get Biden to pass something so inadequate and so small and claim victory because it was bipartisan, and then get kicked in the butt by voters by losing his Congress in 2022, because from the viewpoint of the public, it was all a piece of crap. One couldn't ask for a better argument for the progressive position than what is currently happening across the American West, says Ryan Cooper. At a time of writing, a region from western Texas to California is in the grips of extreme drought, while Texas is suffering electricity shortages due to unseasonable heat. But this has made no dent in the conservative position. It's a perfect example of how broken the politics of climate change are in this country. A climate science paper from last year found that the last 2 decades in the Southwest have seen a mega drought, quote unquote. The period from 2000 to 2018 was the driest period since the 1500s, and the second driest since 800 AD. Climate change was responsible for nearly half of the reduction in precipitation, pushing, quote, what would have been a moderate drought in southwestern North America into mega drought territory, unquote. Since that paper was published, the drought has only gotten worse. As Peter Adden writes at the Washington Post, the mega drought has already forced the imposition of heavy water restrictions in many Southwest states and cities, and even more strict controls will likely be imposed by the end of the year. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the country, will probably be below the level at which a water shortage must be declared by this August, which will trigger all manner of conservation measures. If levels continue to drop throughout the Colorado River system, the Southwest states will have no choice but to impose yet more strict rationing. Agriculture is still the primary human consumer of water in every state in the Southwest. quite a lot of that is in Arizona and Colorado, is uneconomical alfalfa and cotton farms. But California agriculture is tremendously productive, accounting for roughly a third of America's vegetable production and two-thirds of its fruits and nuts. Continued climate change, fuel drought, literally threatens our national food supply. Meanwhile, in Texas this week, an unseasonable heat wave, more and more common because of climate change, has been driving extremely high demand for electricity and apparently knocked a number of power plants offline. The Texas grid regulator thus urged Texans to cut their electricity use during the day to avoid causing blackouts. Ironically, the state government just finished a reform package meant to address the previous catastrophic blackout caused by the February blizzard that killed perhaps 700 people. Experts canvassed by the Texas Monthly agree the package would at least help somewhat, but it is plainly evident that it wasn't enough. All this is profoundly humiliating for smug, self-satisfied Texas boosters like Senator Ted Cruz, who has boasted that his state is scooping up lots of California business and residents. He tweets, "Some angry lefty actor thinks California is the only place that has summer. It's hot everywhere. Try Texas every summertime. But the rest of the country doesn't have such a dysfunctional state government that you can't turn the lights on or run air conditioners. That's a policy failure of the Dems." Stephen Pasquale replies from California, "Asshole, it's climate change related 120 fucking degrees in LA. Let's push all the ACs to the max so the power grid goes down too. There is no way you are this stupid," says Stephen Pasquale. We know he wasn't because he was, number one in his law school class at Harvard. I'm no engineer or MBA. He isn't that stupid, but he is that evil. I'm no engineer or MBA, but I am confident in saying that one important thing for high-tech business is electric power. I'm pretty sure computers need that to work. Conservatives always like to pretend that energy policy is simple and easy, just burn tons of fossil fuels and treat the environment with sneering contempt. In fact, an electric grid is a delicate and extremely complicated piece of actual machinery, vulnerable to extremes of both heat and cold. The fact that Texas has been beaten over the head with twice in less than 4 months. The longer Texas and the rest of the U.S. takes to get away from filthy carbon power, the more damage we will cause to our own infrastructure. The future Americans, if there are any, will no doubt struggle to understand why Texas politicians weren't at the forefront of the push for climate investment. One of the very top priorities would be huge upgrades to the Texas grid to ruggedize and diversify its power sources and transmission lines, and especially add new connections to the rest of the country. Just like in the February cold snap, while the Texas grid was bending under the strain this week, surrounding states are doing better thus far. Instead, they're all doing all they can to stop the federal government from helping their own state. Until conservatives can stop treating climate change like some nonsense cooked up by the Sierra Club, they will continue to wreck their own communities and kill their own people, by the way, though he didn't say that, I just added that, in their eternal quest to own the libs. For them, that's what life is about, owning the libs. They don't care how many people they kill on the way to doing it. After all, they just killed 1 million Americans that way, didn't they? And that's the transition to infrastructure, folks. Thankfully, Democrats' hardened position on the infrastructure package as doubts about the bipartisan deal grow. This is from reader-supported news. They picked it up. Uh, from NBC News. This was written by Julie Tsurkin, Frank Thorpe V, Leanne Caldwell. I must have clicked on something. Yes. Leanne Caldwell Noro Clark. That's a moniker to conjure with. From NBC News, 15th of June, 2021. And progressive Democrats working on a bipartisan infrastructure deal hardened their position on the legislation after tense talks on Monday. So Bernie said, came out against a bipartisan agreement on Monday night after meeting with a bipartisan group of 10 senators. Quote, I wouldn't vote for it, he said to reporters. Quote again, the bottom line is there are a lot of needs facing this country. Now is the time to address those needs, and it has to be paid for in a progressive way, given the fact that we have massive income and wealth inequality in America. Unquote. Last week, the so-called G10 group of 5 Democrats and 5 Rs said it had reached a tentative infrastructure deal. But skepticism from Republicans and impatience from Democrats left its prospects uncertain as lawmakers departed for the weekend. Democrats, Senator Markey, they departed to party over the weekend with their donors. Democrat Senators Ed Markey of Massachusetts and Jeff Merkley of Oregon have insisted that any deal must include action on climate change. They plan to hold a news conference Tuesday to call on lawmakers to include substantive climate action in the proposal. In such as investments to reduce emissions. Some Democrats have tried to pressure their leadership to abandon bipartisan talks and push through a partisan bill instead. But there's no guarantee there are 50 Democratic votes for that tactic either. And for every Democratic vote appearing to be in jeopardy, there's another Republican that is needed to vote in favor. That means the bipartisan group will need to secure more than 10 Republicans to get its proposal across the finish line. Of course, you note the bipartisan group has only 5 Republicans in it. So it needs another 5 Republicans. Many in the Republican conference are still bitter over the breakdown of negotiations between President Joe Biden and their chief negotiator, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, this month. The group of lawmakers huddled on Monday night to flesh out details of their plan. But as they left the half-hour meeting, Democrats sent mixed signals. Quote, there are still conversations on the pay-fors, unquote, said John Tester, Democrat of Montana. Senator John Tester, Democrat of Montana, has refused to learn about MMT now for 10 years. Quote, there is no agreement, unquote. He's still insisting on pay-fors, and by which he means a combination of increased taxes and cutting spending. Of course, the Republicans just want to cut the spending, knowing the more spending they cut, the better the chances are the Democrats are going to lose in 2022. And the lawmakers didn't seem to be on the same page about whether a gas tax would help pay for the proposal. Republicans said it was part of the plan. Democrats said it wasn't. The White House opposes the idea, saying it would increase taxes on the middle class. The White House is proposing to tax the rich and the corporations. The Republicans are proposing to tax people because everybody uses gas and the rich can afford it. So for them, it's the cheapest tax. However, several senators said they plan to release their proposal with details this week, an ambitious goal for a group that seems to disagree on key issues. Both sides plan to present the plan during their respective lunches Tuesday afternoon, said Mitt Romney, Republican of Utah. I confess I don't know whether that means next Tuesday or just this past Tuesday. Tuesday was the 15th. Anyway, we might be able to clear that up with the next piece. The next piece is from Common Dreams. Picture of Bernie and Chuck Schumer advertising for Deer Park water and saying something to each other. They're holding a meeting in the Mansfield room at the U.S. Capitol. That was just yesterday, June 16th, 2021. So the two old friends from high school are having a meeting. Led by Sanders, Senate Dems weigh $6 trillion infrastructure bill as bipartisan talks fail on climate. Before you have a fit, anybody, that's $6 trillion over 10 years. It's only $600 billion a year. So it's still small change. Remember, Bernie's infrastructure, climate, Green New Deal bill was pegged at $16 trillion over 10 years, or $1.6 trillion each year. So this is minuscule. Still minuscule. There's Jake Johnson, June 17th, 2021. With Senate Budget Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders leading the push for an ambitious package, Democrats in the upper chamber are reportedly considering a $6 trillion infrastructure bill as bipartisan negotiations continue to produce proposals that fall short of what experts say is needed to combat the climate emergency and rebuild the nation's crumbling roads, bridges, and water systems. Yes, indeed. As long as we're talking about the Senate Budget Committee and its chairman, Bernie Sanders, we must note that there is a House Budget Committee, and its chairman is Representative John Yarmouth of Kentucky. And John Yarmouth just gave an interview to, who is it? I think it was I believe it was The Hill. Anyway, Lana will correct me since she saw the interview too. Okay, but anyway, what Yarmouth was being asked about in this interview was, can we afford the $6 trillion in infrastructure spending? And Yarmouth, again, is the chair of the House Budget Committee. Why is that important? Because if the infrastructure bill is to be passed through reconciliation, the parameters, the framework of the infrastructure bill have to be defined by the budget committees of the House and the Senate. John Yarmouth is Bernie Sanders' opposite number in the House when it comes to initiating the reconciliation bill. In this interview, John Yarmouth revealed that he is a supporter of the MMT approach to public funding. And he recommended Stephanie Kelton's book to everybody. And he pointed out that we can spend for what we need. And he gave beautiful answers to questions from the interviewer, very skillful answers explaining why we didn't have to worry about financing things or funding things. Unfortunately, for the reconciliation bill, these bills are defined in such a way that they must be fiscally neutral over 10 years. That's part of the rules for reconciliation. And while, the people who will enforce this in the House are Pelosi will enforce it. She will in conference point out that there must be pay-fors in this bill. And in the Senate, there will be objections from senators, and the parliamentarian will point out that if there's deficit spending in this bill, that there can't be any deficit spending in this bill because that's a violation of the reconciliation rules. So, Bernie Sanders and John Yarmuth, even though both know that there is no problem with deficit spending, all or part of this $6 trillion infrastructure bill, they both know that they're not going to be able to deficit spend it. They're going to have to specify pay-fors. And John Yarmuth and Bernie Sanders are both people who think that those pay-fors should be in the form of taxation. The question is that kind of infrastructure climate bill, is that going to get through Congress? So Politico reported Thursday morning that Senate Democrats are weighing spending as much as $6 trillion on their own infrastructure package if the chamber's bipartisan talks fail. That's a quote. Under the tentative plan, which would be pushed through the arcane and restrictive budget reconciliation process, half of the proposed Democrats-only alternative would be paid for, according to Politico. As head of the Senate's budget panel, Sanders has significant influence over the size and scope of the emerging reconciliation bill, which would need just a simple majority to pass. About $2.5 trillion would go through the Finance Committee, $185 billion through the Energy Committee, and almost $500 billion through the Environment and Public Works Committee, Politico noted, citing anonymous officials familiar with the proposal. The $6 trillion plan would go well beyond the roughly $4 trillion in spending that Joe Biden proposed in his two-pronged infrastructure and safety net package, which consists of the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. The Washington Post reported on Thursday, that's of course today, that the $6 trillion plan is expected to include an expansion of Medicare, a top but progressive priority that Biden left out of his original American Families Plan. The emerging proposal would lower the Medicare eligibility age from 65 to 60, a move that would open the health care program to 23 million people and expand benefits to include dental, vision, and hearing. Earlier this week, that, by the way, is the Jayapal-Sanders bill that they've been trying to push through. Earlier this week, Sanders told reporters he wouldn't vote for the infrastructure framework that the bipartisan group of 20 senators is currently hashing out behind closed doors. The group is led by Kristen Sinema and Rob Portman. He's the Republican. By the way, Portman is retiring, so he's not going to be there after this year. Quote, "The bottom line is there are a lot of needs facing this country," said Sanders. "Now is the time to address those needs. It has to be paid for in a progressive way, given the fact we have massive income and wealth inequality in America." So there's Bernie on CNN stating his view. The bipartisan package, details of which began to emerge late Wednesday night, calls for only $579 billion in new spending, a figure that a number of Democratic lawmakers in both the House and the Senate have rejected as badly inadequate to address the country's dire infrastructure needs and make necessary investments in green energy. Analysts have raised alarm over how the bipartisan group is proposing to finance their package, as Republican lawmakers refuse to accept any changes to the 2017 GOP tax cuts for the wealthy and large. Well, one of the things that could be done in a reconciliation bill is just to repeal those tax cuts. That would pay for a lot of stuff. Of course, you wouldn't get any Republicans to vote for it, but technically, if you can get all the Democrats to vote for it, you can push that through 51-50. A 2-page document currently circulating in the Senate lists 11 potential pay-fors, including a reduction in the massive IRS tax gap and, quote, asset recycling. That's fine if it's ruled in the Senate and in the House that the estimates of those paid for through a reduction in the massive IRS tax gap due to tax avoidance and due to tax fraud, that if that gap was closed, that would make a big difference in the costing out of the bill. But we have to see if that gets accepted by the CBO. The CBO would be required to make estimates as to whether the reconciliation bill was a revenue-neutral bill. So if part of the pay-fors involve closing this tax gap, that is subject to approval by the CBO. As the American Prospect's Dave Dayan noted on Twitter, the latter proposal is a concept from Australia that entails funding infrastructure by selling it to private companies. I don't think we want any of that here. Quote, "You cannot talk about the relative worthiness of this effort without talking about how it would sell the common assets of America to the highest bidder," Dayan wrote. In a statement, Sunrise Movement Advocacy Director Lauren Mona said, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer cannot let Kirsten Sinema and Rob Portman hijack this movement and must proceed with at least the $6 trillion proposal. So the Sunrise Movement now is negotiating against itself as well. They were previously big pushers for the Thrive Act, which was a $10 trillion proposal. And now they've negotiated that down to $6 trillion and must proceed with at least $6 trillion. This is a matter of priorities, and Democrats' priorities must be to support working people, create jobs, and stop the impending climate crisis that's destroying our communities. If Democrats fail to do so, we will not only risk our futures, but will jeopardize any electoral chances in 2022 and beyond. We'll do more than risk our futures. It's a heavy risk of our futures. And in fact, since it will probably mean that we'll lose in 2022, it will probably seal our fate. That was too moderate a comment, because if the Democratic administration doesn't start doing big things for the public, and you know what? I immediately suggest that. I suggest that Biden do executive orders immediately that people love drive his own popularity up to 75 to 80%, and then go after Manchin to get his votes on these particular bills. And to repeat myself, has to mint $100 trillion coin, has to forgive all the student debt that he legally can forgive, which many people argue is all of it. And thirdly, he has to give everybody Medicare, the current version of Medicare, for free using Section 1881A of the Social Security Act. In previous live streams, I've explained that in more detail. But if he did those three things, he would immediately increase the electoral chances of winning in 2022 and also increase the pressure on Joe Manchin to vote the way Biden wanted him to vote. Because a Biden with 54% approval rating is nowhere near as influential on a senator as a Biden with a 75 to 80% approval rating. Biden's got to get cracking. He's got to start doing things. He's got to wake up. If he doesn't, everybody's going to walk away from the Democratic Party in 2022. Because if we go with what he's feeding us, it's going to be Trump and the Republicans anyway. So we might as well take a chance on whoever the Green Party or the Movement for a People's Party puts up for the presidency of the United States, and for whoever they put up for Congress, because there has to be a mass walking away from the Democratic Party if they fail to produce during the remainder of this fiscal year and continue to fail to produce through the remainder of this calendar year. This has got to be their last hurrah, because they're not doing nothing. Just to put a capper on all this, we have the final piece tonight. Guess what? Doesn't relate to infrastructure and climate. But here's Mitch. Mitch is telling Joe Manchin, he makes clear, he's telling Joe Manchin no. He's making clear all Republicans will oppose, quote unquote, Manchin voting rights compromise. The idea that Manchin can pass a law to protect the vote with help from the very people it needs protecting from is suspect at best. This was from today, Jay Johnson. And what Mitch said is Republicans will support neither the original For the People Act nor a watered-down version offered by Senator Joe Manchin, who's continued to insist that bipartisan compromise on voting rights is achievable despite mounting evidence to the contrary. So that's it. That's Mitch's thing. He is saying no dice under any circumstances. He said the For the People Act and Manchin's proposal are equally unacceptable and totally inappropriate. All Republicans will oppose that. And what do you suppose Mitch is going to say about the infrastructure bill? Any infrastructure bill, either passed through reconciliation or being passed by some bipartisan crowd. He's still going to say, this shall not pass. Do you think the bipartisan group can get 10 Republicans to go against Mitch McConnell, maybe they'll be able to get 5, maybe 4, maybe 3. By the way, Manchin's plan in a statement on Thursday, McConnell proclaimed that Manchin's compromise version of the For the People Act retains S1's rotten core, an assault on the fundamental idea that states, not the federal government, should decide how to run their own elections. These are not state elections. They are elections for the federal government, for the Congress. It's not simply that the states are gerrymandering districts for state elections. They're gerrymandering districts for the federal elections too. In reality, the plan endorsed by Stacey Abrams, evidently Stacey Abrams endorsed the Manchin compromise plan. McConnell said, that's no compromise. It still subverts the First Amendment to supercharge cancel culture and the left's name and shame campaign. And people are tweeting, of course, the only path forward for the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is to end the filibuster. So Manchin has been given his walking papers by McConnell when it comes to the For the People Act. And the only reason why he hasn't been given his walking papers by McConnell when it comes to the infrastructure bill is because the Republicans are trying to get the Democrats to compromise so much on the damned infrastructure bill that it will guarantee their defeat in 2022. It will not solve any problems. It will not help the situation, but will only reveal how feckless the Democratic Party is in getting its own agenda passed, how feckless Joe Biden is as the President of the United States. So, I wanted to underline that. A stone wall when it comes to the For the People Act. There has to be a rule change in the Senate to eliminate the filibuster when it comes to voting rights bills, at least for that. But it would make things a lot easier and make things a lot simpler for Joe Biden if he simply insisted on eliminating the filibuster altogether. Then it's 51-50, turtles all the way down, democracy all the way down. That's what we need for the Senate of the United States. Okay, to your comments. MK says, either you or me. Not sure what that referred to. Lana says, hi, share to Twitter. There's a book club tonight and for the next few Thursdays for Pavlina's book case for a job guarantee. Other than that, I don't know about competitions. Well, that, of course, is very severe competition for us. I would point out that I have a series of 3 programs myself on Pavlina's job guarantee book. that I did a year ago when the book came out, and you might want to take a look at that at your leisure since it's already up. Uh, okay, okay. I do know that the RP Book Club treatment, I'm sure, by Ramona will be first class. She will have some very good people in, but I think that my series was first class too. Carmen Muniz says Biden is asking sanctions against Venezuela to end. Plus, he wants to do away with forever wars legislation. Joe, you're right. He wants to do some good before he dies. Well, he's the one who can end the sanctions against Venezuela. He doesn't have to ask for that. He can order that. He's the president of the United States. He can end the sanctions. And he can do away with the forever wars legislation. I'm not sure specifically what you're referring to, Carmen, but the House just repealed the AUMF authorization for the use of military force that was originally passed in 2002, and that has been used as justification for many of the forever wars. If he says he wants to do away with that particular legislation, he needs to use his influence in the Senate to pass the House bill, to pass Barbara Lee's bill, which has finally passed the House at long last. Steve Wolfbrand says, hello, Carmen says. ACA is useless if you can't work, especially if your state is red, and won't take expanded Medicare. I think it's expanded Medicaid that we're talking about here. Steve says, the Julian Assange train rolls into LA June 27th. I'll be there. Good for you, Steve. Carmen says, I wonder if Putin convinced Biden to end the Venezuelan sanctions. That would be a good thing that Putin did if he did convince him. Steve Gonzo said, how about that Representative John Yarmouth interview? Yep, that was a terrific interview. There it is. It was with the Washington Journal. It's on C-SPAN. Lana says, yes, I hate health insurance companies. They're equivalent to the Antichrist. Steve Wolfbrand said, the Affordable Care Act is not affordable. The Patriot Act is not patriotic. Whatever our government says, think the exact opposite. Yes, it's full of lies. We need the lies to end. We need spades to be called spades. Absolutely. Steve says, yeah, okay. Evelyn says, the Affordable Cat helps some people, but left but many more crying out. Crying shame. How many died for any lack of health care? My point here, Evelina, is that the Affordable Care Act, because it was passed, took the sales out of the Medicare for All movement for some years, because people in Washington and in the country at large had no more appetite for a fight over health care reform. It cooled down the movement for health care reform, left it basically shiftless for 3 or 4 years while people were waiting to see how the Affordable Care Act was going to work out. By the time the movement got going again, we were in the last years of the Obama administration without a Senate, without a House to help us, and facing the election of Donald Trump, which of course killed the possibility for Medicare for all, for getting it through the Congress. So the passage of the Affordable Care Act led to a lost decade with respect to Medicare for all. So the Affordable Care Act helped some individuals, but it didn't help the American people at large, as I tried to show you here tonight. It didn't even keep up with population changes in the United States. And when it ended, at the present time, even considering the 31 million people who were covered by it, it hasn't lowered the what? Nearly 50,000 people who were not covered in 2009. It really hasn't lowered that figure at all, in my view. And I think when census data next comes out, the census data is going to show that literally no progress has been made in reducing that 49 million people uncovered by insurance number. Even it says, does Russia have universal health care? I don't know, but I doubt it. Kay says, Evelina, my Scott was one of those who died. Steve Gonzo says, Amy Coney Barrett, 2 liberals, 0. They said she would surely dismantle Obamacare. She did not, writes Matt K. Lewis. Well, you know what happened? It was John Roberts. And John Roberts said to 3 of his colleagues, other than himself, to Amy E. Coney Barrett, to Thomas, and to Kavanaugh, look, we 4 have to join all the Democrats on this thing, because if we dismantle Obamacare, that's going to fuel the court, the packing movement. We risk the integrity of the Supreme Court by deciding that way. Better to rule that they have no standing and leave this for the future. That's what happened. It was a political decision on the part of the Supreme Court made out of fear. That's why they decided in that way. But John Roberts is somebody Amy Coney Barrett respects, Brett Kavanaugh respects, and Clarence Thomas respects. So only Sam Alito and Gorsuch were left on the other side. Gorsuch is probably the worst extremist on the court, probably worse than Amy Coney Barrett, probably the cruelest on the court. Carmen Muniz says, it's a fact then. Hashtag austerity is murder. Oh, of course. Okay, so Steve Gonzo, they know where the corporate money goes, where the corporate money is. I'm not sure what OS means there, Kay. Alana says, I remember Tom Harkin writing, they had the votes to pass Medicare for all during Obama's first term, and they blew it. An Obama failure. They surely had the votes to pass it. Look, they could have tanked the filibuster then. Then they could have lost up to 8 Democratic votes and still passed it. They could have allowed 8 of the conservative Dems to vote against it. and they still could have passed it 51-50. Obama didn't want it. It was Obama and Max Baucus who took it off the table. Obama tried to exclude John Conyers from a presidential health care conference so he could not argue for Medicare for all. The fix was in even before Obama was inaugurated on January 20th. Obama and Baucus had agreed there would be no Medicare for all. By the way, at one time in his life, Max Baucus was for Medicare for all. But then he acquired a bunch of donors, and he acquired an assistant who became a mistress, who became an employee of the pharmaceutical companies, and who helped him write large portions of the Affordable Care Act. That's what was going on there then. Carmen Muniz says, and now private health insurance will not pay if they rule your emergency visit wasn't an emergency. Carmen says, criminals. Health insurance companies aren't just death panels. They're complicit in ruining people's lives. Carmen, you're absolutely right. Kay says, people on Massachusetts hated it when Romney put it there, too. Yeah, Romney got a lot of plaudits for that. But of course they hated it. It was a Republican plan. Came from the Heritage Foundation. Kay says, they ruined Medicare too, or are in the process. They are in the process, but it still is not ruined. Still works for some of us. It's expensive, though. It's expensive. We're still out $5,000 to $6,000 a year from it. Steve Wolfbrand says, pretty sure Russia has universal health care. I think the Soviet Union had universal health care, but I don't know what happened when they privatized everything. I don't know what happened when literally the gangsters took over Russia. That is what happened. Steve Gonzo says, intermission, let's all go to the lobby. Steve Gonzo says, entire Portland police crowd control unit resigns after officer indicted on protest assault charge. The team consisted of approximately 50 officers. I'm glad they resigned. I hope the city finds that it can do without them. That would be wonderful. Carmen says, we do need that general strike now because the fascists are killing that right too. Kay says, I saw that, Steve Gonzo. Steve Wolfbrand said, good, they can deliver pizzas. Kay says, set another heat record in Phoenix today, 118 degrees. Glad I'm out of there. Yeah, the drought. Carmen says, droughtless food, high prices. Steve Gonzo says, nah, too dangerous. Steve Wolfbrand says, I put a crew of 12 that work outside. I run a crew of 12 that work outside every single day. They all say that climate is changing rapidly. Kay says, I watched it happening in my 20 plus years in the southeast but North Carolina. Kay says, the weather there completely changed over that time. Steve says, it's been 100 degrees for 4 days. This is supposed to be June gloom. The extreme heat is starting earlier and lasting longer. Our fire season is now all year round. Kay says, I know, Steve Wolfbrand. I have granddaughters out there now. And my daughter's out there. Evelyn says, we're experiencing much colder weather in Argentina, by winter weather in the fall. Steve said, when was the last time Bernie mentioned by revolution? He's a complete fraud. Well, he mentions revolution and our revolution all the time. But of course, we all know He is speaking metaphorically. Kay says, weather here in Ohio has completely changed in the 25 years I have been gone, too. Steve Wolfbrand says, you're in Argentina. Steve Gonzo says, but May 2021 tied for the 6th warmest May on record. That is from NOAA. Evelina says, to be fair, speaking of a revolution that didn't actually materialize isn't useful. As a senator, he's part of the establishment, even while he keeps pushing for some things. And Lana says, I believe that Yarmouth appeared, by the way, it's Yarmuth. He appeared on C-SPAN, but Q&A. Yes, he did. Lana says, Yarmouth was simply beautiful in that interview and answering all the calling questions. And answering them truthfully and not dodging them. He did not dodge. He told the truth. If Bernie had done it that way in 2015, he would be president now, and we would have an entirely different Congress. Bernie made the wrong decision, not trying to educate people in 2015 on the facts, of MMT. Kay says, fire the parliamentarian now. Evelina says, what a money drain. She's probably getting paid very well, as all government consultants, I presumed. She gets paid sort of like a civil servant. She's high level. She probably gets paid something like $140,000 a year or something like that. It's not really lavish pay for someone who has to live in D.C. itself. She probably has to live, in D.C. itself to be around. But inside of D.C., living is very expensive. And Kay says, probably so, Evelina Pont. And Steve says, 435 card Monte. Evelina says, Sunrise Movement dumped lots of ashes from Cal forest fires outside Pelosi's and Senator Feinstein's mansions in that state. And then she said, it came out, as locusts. Evelina really meant to say LOADS or loads. Carmen said, Manchin will be the death knell of the Dems. He might well be. Kay says, I've been following Beto's efforts to get out of the vote in Texas. Steve Wolfman said, is Beto still standing on cables? I would say, is Beto still trying to fly? And Kay says, if he needs to laugh out loud. Kay says, Hightower has been with Beto lately very good. I'm sure that improves Beto's performance. Steve Gonzo says, at Beto O'Rourke 24M, no one is doing more to save democracy right now than at Stacey Abrams. Well, unless she can get Joe Manchin to vote for voting rights, she cannot save democracy. House Budget Committee rep. No, he's the House Budget Committee chair. The chair of the committee got praise from Stephanie Kelton. I missed your comment on that, Dr. Joe. I had a couple of comments on that. And he got praise from me too. Carmen Muniz says, maybe Biden still knows he's president. Still doesn't know he's president. Yeah. Kay says, Obama is corporate owned too. Steve says, at least lower the Medicare age to 50 for fuck's sake. That's what I think too. But actually, you know what I think. I think Biden needs to start with these 3 executive orders. One using Section 1881A of the Social Security Act to give everybody free Medicare. Carmen says, I shared everything I could. There's got to be some finagling by fascist book. This program is just too good not to be drawing more viewers. Love your show, Joe. Getting ready for bed. Kidneys giving me fits. But good night with hugs. Thanks for coming, Carmen. And thanks for sharing. And I hope your kidney is better tomorrow. Steve Wolfbrand says, I don't think Bernie ever really wanted to be president. It was a hoax. Wish I could get my money back. Well, I don't know if I would say that. I don't think in 2016 he really expected to be successful. But I think after a while, he was running to win in 2016. And certainly in 2020, he was running to win. But I also think he made a terrible decision to withdraw when he did. He should have stayed through until the end. He should have sought advice from the whole movement. He should have polled everybody. And he should have asked whether people wanted him to get out or wanted him to stay in. And he should have asked whether people wanted him to run as a third-party candidate or not. He should have taken the advice of the movement in making that particular decision. Doc, do you see Biden's mental capacity falling rapidly? Everyone is noticing it. Okay, look, as you know, I'm an 82-year-old guy. Okay, I'm older than Biden. I also live among lots of people who are in their 70s, and 80s. And I talk to them each day. I see mental capacity failing fast. I know who has that problem here and who doesn't appear to have that problem. The question we have to ask is, does Biden have the mental capacity to understand basics and make fair decisions? In my estimation, he still does. You cannot evaluate him based on the way he talks to reporters, the way he responds in pressure situations where he's dealing with other people in public. That speaks to his capacity to lead, of course. He's not as impressive at leading because of that. But it doesn't mean that he can't evaluate a set of policy options or see that he's in a terrible political situation now and that he has to do some very, very big things to get out of that situation. I'm sure he understands that at the state level, the Republicans are rigging 2022 and 2024 right now, and that he has to stop that rigging, or his chances for the Democrats to win in 2022 fall by 10 to 15%. He must already understand that. It's probably been explained to him. Certainly Jill understands it. Both he and Jill, I'm sure, understand that that is what is going on. So he's got to know that he's got to get the For the People Act and the John Lewis Act, or maybe a single act combining provisions from both, that he's got to get them passed, and he's got to do it now. And I'm sure he knows he has to get a lot of what he's already proposed passed, and something done on the climate. He's perfectly capable of understanding that. He's perfectly capable of giving the go-ahead on this kind of pressure or that kind of pressure or the other kind of pressure. He's perfectly capable of understanding that he has to quit taking the advice of the parliamentarian in the Senate. I mean, these are very simple points. Biden has the mental capacity to see that. He's only 78, for God's sakes. He's 4 years younger than I am. When I was his age, I never forgot anything. I see some of my capacity falling in certain ways. Sometimes I forget names, or I have a harder time coming up with names. Whereas 4 years ago, I never had the slightest bit of problem. I always had an encyclopedic memory for names. Okay. I'm still pretty good. I know that I'm better at that, okay, than a lot of you who are far, far younger than I am. But at the same time, I recognize I'm not what I was 4 years ago. But I also know that I can see what's coming at Biden like a giant freight train. And I'm sure he could see that too. He's got to have people at his side who are telling him. I'm sure people that he's been friends with for a long time, like Ron Klain or Jared Bernstein, are telling him. I'm sure his wife is telling him. They have to see the lay of the land. So what it comes down to is he just being president for a lark because he wanted to be president before he died? Or did he really want to be president because he thought he was the person most likely to save the United States in this particular crisis? If that is why he ran, there's still some hope that he can turn around and use the power of the presidency to put Joe Manchin in a vice and to squeeze. And believe me, if he uses the full power of the presidency, Kyrsten Sinema is just an insect. I mean, really, she has hardly any stature in the Senate. Hardly any in Arizona. Her popularity is falling like a stone. And if he starts managing campaigns outside of the government to pressure her, okay, in Arizona, it will fall even faster. I mean, Biden has private money behind him outside. He can create havoc for her at home, okay, in Arizona. The person to get here, to cave, is Joe Manchin. Now, the pressure points on him have been pointed out, actually, by a number of people. There are points of pressure we can use against him. It's very unfortunate that nobody thought in 2018 that it might have been a good thing for the party to do to give all the DSCC money to Paula Jean Swearengin. That if that had happened, we'd been in a far better place today than we are now. Steve says, Doc, you are sharp like a tack. Thank you, Steve. Steve Gonzo says, where's the first teacher fired for explaining Juneteenth going to come from? Now, you think they're going to fire teachers for explaining Juneteenth? I don't know. There's going to be, if they do that, I'm not even sure what's going to happen. That would be so stupid. Steve Wolfbrand says, even though we don't agree a lot. Thanks, Steve. Kay says, I don't like Kamala as VP. I don't like her as VP either. I really don't see why he supported her. I think it was an idiot decision to pick her as the minority.
I don't like the way she talks.
I mean, why not pick a Barbara Lee or pick a Karen Bass? I mean, why not pick somebody with apparent competence, with apparent intelligence, somebody who knows how to politic? Karen Bass was Speaker of the House in California. She knows how to wheel and deal. I don't think Kamala helped him one bit in the campaign either. I don't think she brought any votes. There was never any question California was going to go for him anyway. And she's not that popular in California. And where else in the United States is she popular? Who loves Kamala? I think he appointed her because the donor class loves her. He thought he'd get more money during the campaign. Maybe that's what it was. Putin said Biden is very clear and very lucid, laugh out loud. Well, what Putin says doesn't matter. Steve Wolfbrand says, lucid like a fog bank. Carmen says, looking at something on Forbes, this says Biden has now canceled $3 billion of student loans. Got to read this in a bit because I want to know when that happened. I think he canceled $3 billion. There was some special condition for some of those students, but he's hardly made a dent in it. He just did it for a very, very small group of people. I mean, there's $1.6 trillion in student loans out there. Carmen Muniz says, by Zach Friedman. Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrand, lucid as gaslighting. Steve Wolfbrand said, I can't remember shit anymore. I'm much younger than you are. We all age differently. I admit that. We age differently. And it could be Biden is really failing fast. But what I'm saying is the outward signs that you're taking as evidence that he's failing fast are not, in my estimation, decisive. There are things that happen to a lot of people who are 77, 78, who are perfectly lucid when they think through a problem. And Biden is living with the presidential problem that he has now. In fact, he may seem not to be lucid publicly because these various problems are gnawing at him and gnawing at his brain all the time. Evelina says in smoke screens, it says, today Biden canceled $500 million of student loan debt for 18,000 borrowers under the Borrower Defense to Student Loan Repayment Rule. Fine. That's nothing. That's not gonna, I mean, that doesn't make any difference. It's stupid. Stupid. If he canceled $500 billion of student loan debt, it would be too little. It would be too little. Kay says, GOP states will fire teachers. I think they're making this a federal holiday. Kay says, this might be yet another thing parents need to teach at home. Shake my head. Steve Gonzo says, Kamala, chameleon. Ya come and go, ya come and go. I've often sung that song, Steve Gonzo. Steve Wolfbrand said, I watched my mother die of Alzheimer's when she didn't know me anymore. I cried like a fucking baby. Biden has that shit. I know. I give him 1 year. But Steve, you were saying that 2 years ago. You were saying the same thing during the primaries. You were saying the same thing during the primaries. Yet he got through the primaries. He got through the election. He got through the American Rescue Plan. Thus far, he hasn't been any worse a president than Obama was. So, off his actual performance, where is the evidence that he's going to be gone in 1 year? Yeah, maybe there's a chance that he won't be able to run in 2024 because he won't be able to handle it anymore. Maybe that time will come in 2023. And maybe he won't even be able to remain president in 2022. That'll have to hand it over to Kamala then, which I think is terrible for us. Terrible for us. But I'm sure he's going to last for more than 1 more year. Kay says, I tried to teach my kids civics at home. Now everything is different, though. Evelina says, si, senor. And Steve Wolfman says, fake lip syncing, like her fake laugh. Yeah, can't she see that her laugh is fake and stop doing it? Can't she got to do a genuine? Can't she learn how to do a genuine laugh? I mean, can't she learn how to do a belly laugh and do those belly laughs instead of that crazy cackle she's got? Steve Gonzo says, at S. Donziger on day 680 of my house arrest, thrilled to receive support on Joe Rogan podcast from the superb and courageous journalist Crystal Ball. Hashtag Free Donziger. Yeah, Free Donziger is right. And then it says, I'm so stressed out over a period of time, I know my brain is not what it should be. I think this is what it feels like to be shell-shocked. Hope it's temporary. Well, you got to keep on exercising that brain, and it will be temporary. And try to relieve that stress. I used to relieve stress by meditating. Now I relieve stress by listening to music and by spending enough time with Bonnie. That lets me relieve my stress. Also, I find these live streams to be relaxing somehow. Carmen Rita says, Bonnie is dancing to Boy George song. Steve says, yes, Doc, I said that, but he's worse. Yeah, he may be worse. But if you were wrong in the time period from 2 years ago to now, you might still be wrong about the time period. I mean, I give you, if he's alive, okay, at 88, he certainly, probably 10 years from now, he certainly wouldn't be capable of handling the presidency by then. But I'm not sure about the next 3 or 4 years. I will say that if he runs for a second term, I don't have a lot of confidence that he'd be able to make it through the second term without very severe deterioration. Okay, I'll also say I'd like it much better if his wife was vice presidential candidate than Kamala Harris. I know that can't happen. But, really, seriously, she'd make a much better vice president than Harris would. Lana says, I do think Biden was severely affected by his son's death. Yes, I think so too. And he has way too much stress, and the presidency is very stressful. I do think he is affected by it. Well, you can see the stress coming out when he loses his cool with the reporters sometime, okay, and snaps at them. I don't take those snaps, though, too seriously. I mean, I don't, throw my hands down, this is terrible. It seems to me that's, an outlet that an ordinary person might feel. I don't think that's a problem. Lindell says, Yarmouth, my phone wants to correct to the incorrect. I see. Carmen says they did a Hillary makeover, and now she's Kamala. But the cackle gives it away. Steve Wilkman says, can you hear the people sing? Do it, Doc.
No, don't sing it.
No, I'm not going to do that. Bonnie says, no, don't do it. So I won't do it. I'll only do it if Bonnie wants me to do it. Bonnie says, no. Evelyn says, Okay, says, no stress relief here. Lana says, Bonnie is good. We like Bonnie. Steve says, I relieve stress by following TYT die. Oh my God. TYT's having problems. Evelyn asks, are you gardening at least a little, Kay? Kay says, wish I had a partner I could be with, but Jeff isn't it. Laugh out loud. Nice enough guy, but not my kind. Steve Wilbrand said Biden cheated on his former wife with Jill. Biden is scum, okay, in my opinion. Did Biden cheat on his former wife with Jill? No, I thought it was Jill who cheated with her husband. Biden's first wife was killed in the auto accident. And he only met Jill sometime after that. I think it was 2 or 3 years after that.
What was that?
I don't know. Something fell down from somewhere. So, as I recall the story, Jill cheated on her husband. That is not unusual in American life today, I'm afraid. And it does not necessarily mean that the people are scum. I do not draw those conclusions. Jill and Biden have been married since when? Since 1974 or 1975. And as far as people know, they are a close couple. That is a lot of years. It's like 46 years or 47 years now. Okay, says, very little these days, although Jeff tries his best with my coaching, Evelina. Steve says, did Corn Pop have hairy cockroach legs? Kay says, my knees are junk these days due to all the falls I had when I lived downtown. Canton has gone to shit. Canton, Ohio. Steve Wolfman says, Corn Pop was bad, dude. Steve Wolfbrand said Jill was the babysitter before the accident. Come on, Steve. She wasn't the babysitter before the accident. That's ridiculous. Steve Gunter says, what? Corn Pop was Mexican. Hashtag bad dude. Okay, folks, you've had your fun with me now. I'm going to leave. I'll be back on Saturday. Okay? There'll be some good stuff on Saturday. My videos will be appearing, as far as I know, beginning on Monday on KRTD Media. They're going to start to rerun some of the live streams that have been turned into videos. This is going to be on the YouTube page of KRTD Media. So they're going to be running some of those between 10 and 12 in the morning. Okay, and I'm going to try to sort of be in the background for comments, and then I'll be able to interact with some of the commenters while still being able to do other things like be active on Twitter and do research for my shows. Okay, in the evening. Also, once they get a technical problem over there, I'll be live streaming to KRTD Media 2. Now, there's been a disturbance at KRTD Media. I'm not sure what happened. Kerry Barber was involved. Andy Kennedy was involved. Okay, they both were involved. And there was something about the movement for a People's Party somehow being involved. There was a conflict of some sort. I don't know the basis of the conflict, okay, as yet. People are, hurling accusations from both sides. There's a video on this that was done by Kerry Barber and Andy Kennedy. Haven't had a chance to watch the video yet. The KRTD people are giving me their side of the story. I have extremely good relations with them. So far as I know, they're stand-up people. So I'm going to find out what the situation is, and I'm going to see what's going on there. But until further notice, they'll be running some of the videos. I'll be commenting on them, and I'll be live streaming to their channel at my usual times, simultaneously with my live streams to Facebook and to YouTube. And Dolores Pierce says, thank you and good night all. And I certainly agree. And Kay says, we love you, Joe. Thank you all for another great discussion. I love you all. And we love you too, Kay. We really do. Steve Gonzo said, corn pops bringing drugs, guns, and you know the thing. Yeah, I know the thing. Steve Wolfbrand says, video killed the radio star. Lana says, good night. Evelina says, that's too bad. We have to stand together, not divided. There are always going to be these interpersonal conflicts. They're normal. We have to try to look at, what's fair, but do our best to scope things out. And that's all we can do. Just look at the different sides of the situation and see whether there's some degree of fairness, okay, on both sides. It's very hard to evaluate sometimes because one person says this and the other person says that. And you just have to judge what the likelihood is that the complaint involved involves some injustice on one side or the other, or well, whether it's a misunderstanding, okay, a miscommunication, or whether it's overblown, okay, or not. Uh, it's very hard to evaluate these situations. Okay, it really is. So we just have to all do the best we can, and that's what I'm going to do. So again, good night. I'm going to see you on Saturday. I hope to see you on Saturday. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. And thank you for your comments.